A very good morning to all of you, and I also like to welcome my panel members for today's for this session. In fact, this session is the Eureka moments, new ways of teaching in a pandemic future. But I would like to open up by saying, even this year, even the summit is also Eureka moment, because the first time we're having on hybrid mode. So both we have participants physically present and also we are on remote, virtually. So I would like to welcome all the panelists. So we have our panelists, Dr. Ahmad Rafi bin Kassim, who's the Deputy Director General of Education, Malaysia, and Ministry of Education, and Anthony Ng, CEO of Malaysian Institute of Technology Academy and co-founder MITstem International School, and Mr. Chan Soon Seng, Chief Executive Officer, Teach for Malaysia. We have Dr. Duzaimi Madrani, Chief Executive Officer, Drozania.com, and Dr. Loy Teck Ngan, who's the Group CEO, Taylor's Education Group. Now, the topic that is put forward today is new ways of teaching in a pandemic future. Now, we see we are already in part of the future, because from last year until now, we are still in the pandemic situation. That is, you have to address remote learning using virtual methods have forced educators to be creative in their ways of teaching. And with COVID-19 recurring, education needs to innovate and develop methods of teaching to sustain the attention span of students. This session explores the various innovative ideas which have emerged to make teaching more engaging. So our panel members today will discuss and share their experiences and the role they play in overcoming these challenges and to face the future. So if you allow me, I would like to call the first speaker. I follow the list in the program. We have Dr. Ahmad Rafi bin Kassim, as I mentioned earlier, who's from the Ministry of Education, Malaysia. Now you will be more in charge of the regulations and rules which you may have to develop to facilitate this innovative teaching and learning. So maybe you can spend a few minutes in explaining about your role and how you as an enabler to face the future learning methods to help develop our nation. Over to you.
Mr. Moderator? Okay, I'm sorry about that technical glitch. Well, that's part of the new normal. So I will repeat. There are several things that happening during the pandemic, during the school session last year in 2020. First of all, we have to have the abrupt school closures, which happened in March. So it was a sudden change for us, and we need to look at different ways of doing teaching and learning. And therefore, we introduced remote learning and home-based teaching and learning. And also, we introduced digital tools in school. But as you mentioned earlier about the rules, the regulation, and the SOP, that comes into play when we reopen the schools later on. And there's a lot of changes in the way we do things, because once we open the new school session, having the students and the teachers physically in school requires a different set of rules and regulation. Therefore, the standard operating procedures, or the SOP for the schools have been developed together with the National Security Council, or the MKN, and the Ministry of Health, together with different agencies. And by having that, the new rules, such as having physical distance between students with a minimum of 1 meter, having them to wash their hands regularly, having a limited number of students in classes, having their meals in the classes rather than in school canteens become into play. So that's the new norm. But before we get to that point of reopening of the schools, the teaching and learning have to occur. And during that time, we have introduced teaching and learning via online or offline or off-site, and also a combination of both, having a hybrid teaching and learning. And at the end, when we are able to open up the school physically, then we have a face-to-face with a new set of SOP. So this is a sudden change within our school session, and it's a new learning experience for us, not just in Malaysia. I believe around the world, people having to learn and relearn new way of doing things in this new normal. However, if we look back at our national education blueprint, we want and we committed to provide equal access to quality education and leveraging on ICT to scale up the quality learning across all schools in Malaysia during the pandemic. So we look at different ways of doing things, as I mentioned earlier, having the home-based teaching and learning, or in short, PDPR, pembelajaran dan pengajaran di rumah. PDPR is a new way of doing things for us. And that's the main way of doing things to ensure that our students enable them to study from home. We also look at different learning management system, or LMS, such as Google Classroom. We also look at digital learning platform, or Dilemma, where we develop content. We prepared a platform where teachers and students can interact and have access to learning materials. We also establish TV channel, educational TV channel. Initially, we have EduWeb TV, which is a totally online TV station. And then we work together with RTM and Astro to have OK TV and Tutor TV. And finally, we have Didik TV, which is totally dedicated for education from 7 a.m. until midnight. So having that, we also utilize existing channels such as YouTube, and we have a group of teachers who call themselves Cikgu Tube, who develop materials and learning session online, whereby the students can access all these materials and also attend classes via the social media. And finally, we know that the largest portion of access towards learning during this pandemic era is to use social media. So Facebook, Telegram, WhatsApp become the main contributor to help teachers to communicate with students during this pandemic. So in addition to having an online teaching and learning, we know that this is still a huge number of students who are not able to have access to the internet. In our survey, it's almost 40% did not get that access. Therefore, we also offer offline and off-site learning, and also a combination of online and offline learning, whereby the teachers can use different methods to make sure that the students have access to the learning material. One of the things that we also look at during this pandemic is how our students learn and become active learners, because we know that they are not in front of the teachers like we used to do. So they are at a distance. So the way we do things need to be different than what we used to do in the classroom. So that is a huge challenge for us, and I will touch on that later on. But one of the major things that we need to do during this pandemic is to get the support from particularly the parents, the PTA, and the community, as well as support from community and corporate, because many of the students, they need a space to access to the internet. So many parties in communities have provided internet access for the students. For instance, in many villages, we can see that the masjid or the surau, they provided internet access for the students. In certain communities in rural areas, they provide free Wi-Fi and also broadband so that the student can go and learn. And this kind of support is needed because the teachers can feel that they are not alone in teaching and learning. We also focus on developing our teachers with new skills so that we can improve the teaching and learning, and the teachers are confident to teach in a new way. Because we know that in this kind of situation, our educators, our teachers is the core. They are the one that are going to make the difference. It's not just the technology. So if you want to teach using these new tools, the teachers need to have the skills, the confidence, and the knowledge to deploy, to teach effectively. And therefore, we also at the ministry level provide training, reskilling of our teachers. In addition to the digital, online, offline, and the technical support that we get from the schools, there are still communities that are far off in rural areas, in remote areas that are disconnected. So they need to get the support. So we really feel proud of our teachers who teach in rural and remote areas, who take the extra mile to go to the community. For instance, we have our teachers in Sabah, in Sarawak. I know those in Kundasang, those in the PPD Sandakan, who went to the islands to send the materials to the villages so that the students can have access to the learning material. And also recently, I visited a school in Jelebu, Negeri Sembilan, whereby the SK Putra, 95% of the students are from the orang asli in Negeri Sembilan and also in Pahang. So during the pandemic, before we open up the schools, the teachers take their own initiative to go use their own money to rent the four-wheel drive, go into the villages so far away, set up small tents, huts like what's being displayed here, and use that few hours available to teach and do activities with the students. And this effort is just one of the few examples that we have in the nation, where the teachers go all the way to make sure that the students, even though they are not able to have access through online, they are still able to learn during this period. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to highlight that even though we are facing these challenging times, our teachers at the highest quality possible that we can deliver from either the teachers from the Teachers Training Institute or from our universities. They were prepared to teach in a different way, but having this such challenges for them, they innovate, they find ways to get out of these issues and make sure that the students be able to learn during this time. And we can see that some of our teachers who were in the top rank in the world as one of the finalists of the Global Teacher Award, like Cikgu Samuel, Dr. Sir Hajuan, and the rest. I think it shows that our teachers are good and they are able and they are capable of delivering. However, we have to acknowledge that having this pandemic is a new challenge for us. We did a lot of surveys, and one of the surveys I would like to share with you is that we found that the majority or the way our students learn and the way our teachers able to reach out to the students to learn and to teach during this time, during this pandemic era, we found that many still unable to access the online. For instance, in this chart, you can see that offline is 39% and offsite is 1%. That means 40% are not able to get internet access. And we understand that the government is working hard to provide the internet access to the whole nation through, particularly through the Jendela initiative by the government, and hopefully by having that, the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure for internet access would help us in the education sector to reach out to our students wherever they are. And secondly, we also look at the type of gadgets used by the students. From this chart, we can see that the huge majority of the students use handphone. One of the reasons is because they don't have access to computers or tablets. And many of them, especially the young ones in the primary school, they share the handphone with their parents. So in many instances, we found that when the teachers give instruction, material, and so on, the students cannot access to those materials in the daytime because the parents go to work. Then they only get it when the parents come back from work. So that's also a challenge for us. Ladies and gentlemen, we also understand that the school is not just about the teacher and the students and the material and the technology involved. We know that schools also provide a different function within and also outside the classroom. And this is also a social arena where values and skills develop and practice. And we also having difficulties, and we understand the challenges, particularly with children with special needs. We have seen how important the role of parents to support their children during this pandemic, where the parents need to help the children to learn at home, in a way taking some of the roles of a teacher at home. However, for children with special needs, the needs is higher, the challenge is higher, it's much more complicated. And in one of our surveys, we found that 15% of the parents of special needs education children are also having difficulties to execute the plan by the teachers. Therefore, support from the community is needed. And we are happy that now we are able to open up the schools to have the face-to-face session where the teachers can have access directly with the children. And even though there's a special SOP that we need to follow during this period, but I think, and we think at the Ministry of Education, that's the best possible way at this point of time to address these challenges. We still have time, Mr. Moderator? Okay. Right. So one of the issues also that we found during the closure of the school is the peer-to-peer interaction between children. We know as children, we grow up to play. We need to talk to each other. We need to play with each other. There should be a lot of physical activities. But during this pandemic, there's a lot of limitation for physical activities. So we know that extra effort need to be put in place for that the children have some form of physical activities and interaction. So the role played by the family at home is really, really important. We know that they cannot go out and play with other children outside, but the parents need to play this role, have to have a plan so that they can play and interact with their family members at home and even with neighbors, but following the SOP. Another aspect that parents usually ask is about the assessment. One of the, I think the major concern of parents when we facing this pandemic, whether to have this national exam. So last year we decided that UPSR, the exam, the national exam for year 6 for primary school, we decided to put on hold. So we put aside UPSR. So that takes a lot of burden from the teachers as well as the parents. And it actually opened up an opportunity to look at school-based assessment. We have been talking about school-based assessment for quite some time. So classroom-based assessment, formative assessment. So by having this challenging time now, it's actually a blessing in disguise. So now people are looking at the formative assessment. And we have done that for not just for the primary school, but we also use it for matriculation and for IPG, the Teacher Training Institute. So we don't have that final end of the year final exam. And instead, we are using at a continuous assessment and a formative assessment throughout the year. And it helped to achieve our goal to have a school-based assessment at the end. So hopefully, this will open up new opportunities for us as well. Just one last thing before I summarize my presentation. There's a lot of questions about how we, I think the moderator also asked just now about the SOP. And many people think that MOE alone decide when to close the school or open up the schools, whether to close just the class or the whole school, whether you should come in the morning or in the afternoon and so on. So all these rules are set together with the National Security Council and Ministry of Health. We sat together with them to come up with the SOP, and it's not that easy. There's a lot of things, and they scrutinize everything to the greater details that we have to go back and forth. Like the first guidelines that came out before the reopening of the schools, we went through like 43 times to make sure that everything is in order. And the hardest part is to make sure that all the schools comply with the rules. The National Security Council and Ministry of Health set that regulation, the distancing, for instance, for a very particular reason, to make sure that the children and the teachers are safe in school. They can learn and grow in a safe manner. So we need to do that. And particularly when we have children in our hostels, in schools. So we are the parents in those schools. We need to make sure that they are safe 24 hours a day. And even now, when we reopening of the schools, our responsibility is not just within the school. We are not just taking the temperature when they walk into the schools and make sure that they don't have any issues, but also after school. You can see that recently we go to the schools to make sure that after school, what happened to the children. Because normally, after school, when they will just run out and they can gather together at the bus stop and so on. So now we have to make sure that everybody comply. So during this time, it's also our responsibility to work together with the parents and the community, the police and so on, to make sure that they are safe not only in the school, but also when they go out from the school during the dispersal after school session. I think, Mr. Moderator, I have to stop here. Then maybe if they have other opportunities later on, we can continue our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. But before I go on to the next panel speaker, just one question. We are here talking about the future, but as I mentioned earlier, we are already in the future mode where we have digital learning, all this happening. But assuming we recover fully from the pandemic, yeah. So will the Ministry of Education be going back to conventional learning methods, or you will still be using the blended mode And earlier speakers, the earlier sessions also said today's youngsters, the learning methods are different. They are already digital. So do you think you will be maintaining this what you have, maybe on a different percentage, but you will continue, or you go back to conventional learning after everything is normal?
Thank you. Well, we have said it clearly. This is the new normal. We are in the new normal. So once the children start learning using this digital material, for instance, having a Zoom meeting like this, it is part and parcel of their life. So I don't think the Ministry of Education will go back to the old way of doing things. We are actually now working on our digital learning plan, master plan, and that will work together with the national agenda under Jendela. And hopefully by having that plan in hand, we need to change the way we do things. It's not just having the infrastructure and the digital infrastructure as an enabler, but we also need to look at how we prepare our teachers. Because currently at our Teacher Training Institute, they are already embedded the way we do, like the PDPR, the new way of doing assessment, alternative assessment, and so on, is already embedded in our teaching colleges. So I strongly believe that this is the beginning of the future. We are already there, and we are going to move forward. Of course, we need to acknowledge that there are certain parts of the countries where in our country that they are still needed more basic infrastructure. If you look at the remote island in rural Sabah and Sarawak particularly, they may not get there yet, but we are preparing them towards the future that we envision together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So move on to the next panel speaker, Mr. Anthony Ng. So you can briefly tell about the challenges and what innovation you have made in your international school to cater for the new norm. Over to you.
Hi, Professor Alan. Nice to meet you. Hi, guys. Thank you, everyone here, to all fellow educators. Before I go into that, let's just play a video on that. Thank you.
months on end.
Doors. In China, the new school semester has been postponed since the beginning of the year, calling on students to stay outside Asia. Italy, the worst-hit country in Europe, has shut schools across the nation. But a school near Milan launched an e-learning class for students to follow their teachers' assignments at home. In France, students currently under a national lockdown here. By using software like Canvas, it enables college students to complete assignments, deliver presentations, and take quizzes. At the end of the week, they will receive feedback from their professors online. Seoul is also testing out online classes at 10 elementary, middle, and high schools in the city until this Friday. However, educators have concerns surrounding internet access and any weaknesses that the system may have compared to face-to-face learning.
Now I will show demo how to access remotely our software and our hardware. Okay, now I will share screen with my student how to access the CI programmer software. Now I will give access to allow students using this PLC software. Okay, now student can be access the software. So they will go to start button here to start the machine.
All right, guys. So that's the video of what we do. As you all know, the pandemic happened, and we were ready because we have our online, a MOOC, Massive Open Online course as well. Let's go on to the next slide. This is where we are. We are in Kota Kemuning in Shah Alam. We have a 6-story building. We're one of the latest. We're just a startup school. We started in 2019, but we're focused on STEM. If you know STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics itself. And our parent company is MIT, Malaysian Institute of Technology Academy. So here are very important information of our technology partners that we share, because the technology that we use is itself of what we call Industry 4.0. We work with the founder or the inventor of Industry 4.0 since 2014. That is the Bosch company, Rex Roth. 2014, we've been pushing Industry 4.0 to now. And we started STEM in 2019 after an inspiration that we had from the Obama Foundation that they started STEM in 2010. 2017, we went over to the States. We tied up with Google, we worked with Amazon, I was part of the Silicon Valley innovation team as well to bring all these technologies in place. So we had Fanuc, the world's largest robot producer as well. We have Omron. We have global clients. We put even this company, Top Glove as well, as one of our global clients, because that's where we also help them to automate, because currently right now, they don't have manpower and so on. So automation will be one of the areas they're looking at. Besides, the school is also a Cambridge assessment. We are also STEM.org partners. That's where in the United States. And Microsoft as well, authorized education partner. We work with AdvancedEd in US, and we are also Amazon Web Services EdStart member, and also Google G Suite. The jobs of the future, our tagline is creating experts of the future. So with the Eureka moments that we're teaching the new technologies out there, we're teaching like to become a full stack developer, programmer, app developer, an IoT engineer, an AI and machine learning architect, an AR and VR engineer, a drone pilot, data scientist, 3D printing, roboticist, cloud engineers, and cybersecurity. So these are all the areas which are hot jobs at the moment, especially pre-COVID and even post-COVID, even more so. These are the jobs we create for experts for the future. With the current, as all of you know, the learning management system is actually an interactive area. Interactive with learning content, with instant subject, with teacher specialized. We even have robot marking as well. We have online questions answered, chat forums, live online lessons, student tracking, and a lot of AI new functions that we build in as well. One of the areas of the AI new functions as well we build in is artificial intelligence on facial recognition. Other areas that our parent company as I mentioned, we specialize in Industrial Revolution 4.0 trainings for industry. So we are a very industry-based area as well. The 9 pillars such as IoT, robotics, AR, VR, big data, 3D simulation. We've done a lot of projects even currently for Penjana, or we call it the National Recovery Mode as well, 2.0, with Perkeso or Saxo, with HRDF, the National Dual Training System, and Rise Forward of the latest areas as well. As I mentioned, this is in beta testing. So with GDPR issues, we couldn't show our students because of this PDPA and GDPR issues. But this is where we use Azure. Azure is one of the partners that we're testing out the beta function, because at the moment, one of the biggest problem, I'm sure all of you face the same problem. You're not sure when the students are looking on the screen whether they are really paying attention. You can't even tell their emotions. You can't tell what is happening. So with this AI facial recognition that we built on Azure as well, that we can tell exactly, are they happy? Are they sad? What is their reaction? At the same time, we could call up Alexa. Alexa, we could call up Google Home. Google, could you play me? The AI will read that and will say that, oh, why not? I'll play your favorite song before you even start your lessons. Because we're doing both synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. The synchronous ones, yes, you're able to catch it. The asynchronous one is a bit difficult to catch what is that. Whether they're smiling, whether they're sad, whether their glasses, their hair color, this AI technology could do that. And the last that we do is the blockchain DNA fingerprinting technology. This technology itself is very important to us because it actually tells as well the student authenticity. Because all these technology that we use, it helps them for micro-credentialings. The micro-credentials that they get could get them university credits. So with partners as well, with NTU and NUS in Singapore, they allow this transfer of credits over to our students. That's why we have this blockchain as well. So, I can't click on this. Were you able to click? Help me click. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, I just wanted to show the live area of the blockchain technology that we use as well. This is one of the example of the blockchain cert that we have. All right, so thank you very much. You have been a great audience. Give yourself a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ng. Maybe you can briefly share what are the challenges you faced in introducing this high tech to the students in your school, both maybe on policies.
In terms of the students as well, not really much of an issue because these are students who are already learning tech. They're programming Python and they're doing C++ and so on. So it's not really an issue in terms of that, because by going online, especially we use Microsoft Teams as well to go online, and also LMS, they actually had is an easy transition for them. The only issue was, I think, was a little bit of the teachers, especially. Teachers were not well accustomed to go online and teaching hours and hours over the computer without other technologies built in as well, because we don't have an AR, VR function as well. There's no holograms inside there. It's just PowerPoint with videos. PowerPoint with videos. So the content in the learning management system, that we change it a lot to actually suit to the students, because the students need to actually see, besides videos, besides PowerPoint, they could actually have interactive areas as well. So another area as well we're trying to build up in our MOOC system as well is more interactive area, because it's usually a one-way area, especially when it comes to asynchronous assignments and so on. But if it comes to synchronous learning, you can see 90% of students turn off their camera, or 95% of students turn off their camera. It's how you motivate them, tell them, and let them know what are the bigger purpose that they're doing and why are they turning on the camera to actually understand them even better. So that's one of the biggest areas. The teachers always hard to get them to turn on the camera and so on. Yeah, this is one of the areas.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll have more questions later. We can move on to the next panel speaker, Mr. Chan Soon Seng from Teach for Malaysia. Can you share with us your contribution to the new form of learning and what were your challenges you faced? Please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And it's an honor to be here on this panel, especially alongside Dr. Rafee. And the only unfortunate thing is that we have no woman on this panel, but we'll hear from the ladies later this afternoon, but would have been amazing to have one share their opinion alongside us. My name is Soon Seng, and I have the privilege of leading an organization called Teach from Malaysia. And I started off my career, I guess a similarity that Dr. Rafee and I have is that we were both teachers. And so I used to teach in a high-needs public secondary school in Malaysia. And so what Teach from Malaysia does is that our mission is to build a movement of leaders in the education ecosystem to empower all children in Malaysia to realize their potential. And we have the privilege of working with the Ministry of Education to deliver the Teach from Malaysia program, which is a program in which we recruit and select some of the most promising young Malaysians to teach for 2 years in high-need schools all across the country, based on the premise that no matter where you were born, no matter your socioeconomic background, you still deserve an excellent education. And we believe that teachers are absolutely fundamental in ensuring that that education is experienced. So I think that in response to sort of what's happened across COVID-19 last year, at Teach from Malaysia, I think there were two key priorities for us. And the first aspect of it was around how do we ensure that students continue to learn despite their connectivity, no matter where they are. Like I said, we serve students that are primarily from B40 communities, and the majority of these students didn't have a device or internet, and so how do we reach those students? And you know, the Ministry of Education has been doing everything that they can to ensure that there is the infrastructure, ensure that there are the platforms, ensure that there are the systems and the procedures that are in place. So then the question on Teach from Malaysia's end is how do we utilize what is provided by the ministry and ensure that it is truly reaching or realizing the vision that the ministry has laid out. The second key question that we're asking ourselves, or we've been thinking a lot about, and I think this relates a lot to our question or the topic at hand about new ways of teaching, is really thinking about what are the opportunities that present ourselves or that are presented to us in education as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are three sort of areas that we advocate for at Teach from Malaysia that I'll dive into a little bit more later. But that's thinking, Dr. Rafee talked about it, the opportunities that we have to shift and reimagine assessments in Malaysia, the opportunities we have to focus on holistic 21st century learning, and the ways in which we use technology moving forward. But just want to show you a little bit, some pictures. So some of the things that we did last year was that to enable students with the lowest resources to have access to student-centered learning. And what we did was we worked with partners to deliver learning boxes, and we're still continuing to deliver these learning boxes to students in the most remote communities. So in the islands off of Semporna, this is in Lawas in Sarawak, and to Orang Asli communities in Gopeng. And so we've been sending these boxes that are filled with STEM and arts activities for students to be able to just learn by themselves. So how are students actually being able to lead their own learning during this period of time? And so what you see these kids playing with is there's this box, the theme of the box is light and sound, and so they had to create a quote-unquote a spy camera, which is basically creating a periscope so that they have a hands-on experience to keep engaged in learning. When you don't have a teacher that you can access, we needed to give them materials and activities that they could be engaged with all on their own. Another thing that Dr. Rafee spoke about as well is really teachers weren't prepared to teach in a pandemic. And a huge part of our focus has been training our fellows, we call our teachers fellows, to really meet the needs of students across the broad range of connectivity and technology availability that their students have. So whether your students have zero access, whether they have low access, medium, or high access, teachers need to be prepared and supported to be able to deliver education or facilitate education across all of those ranges. And obviously, teachers are coming into this alongside in Malaysia and all across the world in a totally, these are totally uncharted waters. And so we need to figure out how do we best support our teachers to navigate the range of things. So this is a little bit about what we did across last year, but what I really want to focus on is thinking about how do we move forward together. So Michael Fullen recently published a report about the right drivers for system change in education. And one of the things that he that I'm quoting from in that report is this statement that says, above all, we recommend avoiding a loss of learning mindset that would take us back to traditional learning, to a system that we know was not working for the vast majority of students. And so I think that when we think about how do we move forward, it can be easy to get caught up in how do we recover and get back to where we were in the past? How do we get back to ensuring that we're on track to sit for examinations and that our students are prepared to score A's on their national assessments? And I guess the consideration that I'm putting out there is that maybe that isn't necessarily the singular goal or the key thing about how we move forward. And we have a massive opportunity as educators to reimagine how we do move forward. We've heard from the universities about different ways that we need to approach the future, that the future is human and it's about how we empower and facilitate a holistic learning experience. And we're going to hear later about jobs of the future. We don't know what the jobs of the future are, so how do we prepare students to have the skills to figure out how to do those jobs in the future? So I think 3 ideas that I'd love us to consider as we think about new ways of teaching and the future of education. So number 1, thinking about how we reimagine assessments. Number 2, thinking about how the kind of teaching we deliver is anchored on the kind of outcomes that we want to see. And I'll explain this a little bit more. And finally, how do we enable an environment that supports us to deliver the kind of outcomes that we want to have for our students? So, I think we all are very, very clear about Malaysia's obsession with our high-stakes academic testing. But our national education philosophy in Malaysia actually calls for a holistic approach to education. So if you look at this circular diagram on the outside, we see the key outcomes, it's the GERIS, the 5 key outcomes that the national education philosophy wants to inculcate in students. And in the inner circle are the 6 student aspirations of the Malaysian education blueprint. But often when we assess, what we see assessed is one aspect, which is the intellectual aspect, right? So we prize our SPM results, and the ministry is doing a lot to shift away from academics only outcomes. So I think at the UPSR level, at the PT3 level, there have been shifts, but in order for that to really work across the board, from the Ministry of Education, from employers, from higher education institutions to society at large, we need to value the other aspects or the holistic aspects of learning. So when we think about the skills that students want, if our key measures to make it from school to the next level and from university into work are academic qualifications, then we're not enabling an environment where we are able to have a more holistic education. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that could look like, right? So, and I'll go really quickly, so apologize. I'm speaking really quickly. But at Teach for Malaysia, the kind of students that we want to see are students that are empowered to be leaders of their own learning, their future, and the future of Malaysia. And what we then did is that we looked at the Ministry of at the Malaysian Education Blueprint, and we looked at the 6 student aspirations, and we honed in on leadership. And there were 4 aspects of leadership that the Ministry of the Malaysian Education Blueprint calls for, 4 competencies. And at Teach for Malaysia, we developed a competency framework of leadership that enables students to develop leadership at the individual, personal level, at the interpersonal level, and also at the organizational or team level. And then we basically work with our students to develop these with experiential project-based learning. The next part is, so basically all of these things, all of these competencies, they're not academic outcomes. They're not whether you can memorize a piece of content, they're skills, and we can measure them. We developed a measurement framework, and we can measure all of these different skills and see students develop and grow and progress on all of the competencies. So the next question, so the first one is reimagining assessments. Number 2 is reimagining what we develop with our students. What kind of outcomes do we want to see? Do I want my students to be able to memorize all of the, let's say, historical facts, right? That's important to learn those things, but ultimately, can I also measure how they apply those things and use that to make a difference in the world today? So finally, the next aspect is really thinking about how do we use technology moving forward? We have such a great opportunity with all the devices. I'll go really quickly, but oftentimes what we've seen is we're stuck in the substitution level. So a key reason why there's a huge challenge in ensuring that students are engaged is because we're trying to lecture through a Zoom call. No student wants to be lectured through a Zoom call. If we're just going to substitute lectures with technology, that's not going to work. And we have to think about at the top two levels, how are we actually modifying or redefining the actual work that students do? It needs to be project-based. We need to have flipped classrooms. We need to have inquiry experiential-based learning. A key thing, a low-hanging fruit, Dr. Rafee, if you can consider, is we have a pekeliling that bans students from using mobile phones in the classroom. With all of the devices rolling out, if we want a technology-enabled classroom as we return to face-to-face classrooms, we need to revise the policies that enable technology to be used or not. And flipped classroom and blended learning. This is a screenshot of a Padlet that one of our fellows created, and it's a low-hanging fruit for us to consider as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I think I'll put some questions to the end because I think we are running short of time. Maybe now I'll get the next panel speaker, Mr. Dr. Ruzaimi. And I think you're from the Rosania. You have a platform which provides teaching aids and all that. So can you please tell something how you are contributing towards the Eureka new learning norms? Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Dr. Ilan Jolan. I think I want to give you an experience how our children's experience in virtual environment learning and teaching and learning. Can you prepare a paper with me, for me, everybody? I just want to test you, just to give you an experience how our children learn in virtual environment. Okay, I'm a teacher now, and then prepare me a paper. This is the screen. This is the screen of me teaching you. And then you are now learning the process. Okay, prepare, stand by. Okay, one thing I want you to draw me is a pot with a flower. That is the instruction, a pot with a flower. Yes, a pot with a flower. Okay, then once you finish, then it's okay, good, very good. Okay, next is I'm going to ask you to draw me your dream house. Your dream house. Okay, I think everybody got their dream house right. Okay, this is two things that we have to alert. Okay, one is when I ask you to draw a pot with a flower, I ask you to draw something related to remember in HOTS, higher order thinking skills. I'm asking you to draw something related to LOTS, lower order thinking skills. When I ask you to draw a dream house, I ask you to draw something related to higher order thinking skills. Agreed? And then when I ask you to draw a pot, your brain, or kalau orang Melayu kata, no complain. When we ask you to draw a dream house, alamak, you see, there's a brain malfunctions there. You seem disturbed. You understand what I'm trying to tell you. So what makes virtual learning more complicated is the ability of a teacher to explain something more critical, more something that's difficult. So they need whiteboard. Okay? They need whiteboard to explain something. but you also have difficulties to understand the teachers who are talking in the screen without demonstrating that process. That is the challenge that we need to address. Because I'm very sure I saw a lot of teachers, a lot of lecturers doing explanation using PowerPoint and also Zoom, yeah. But there's no demonstration at all. That is the challenge of us. Okay, I always, because my background is an architect, I always believe I have to try my best to simplify things, not complicated things. That is the most crucial part in teaching and learning. If you are trying to complex the things will become complex. If you try to make the teaching and learning simplified, then you make the teaching and process become more interesting. Okay, so back to my slide. What can I do? Factors that we can control. Agree with me or not? As a teacher, as a parents, as a educators, authorities, or as teachers, always questions, what can I do? So factors that we can control. Okay, next question is, don't ask this question, what can you do? Because there's 1,001 solution, you have to wait others to do it for you. Okay, during the pandemics, I share my experience. I'm a trainer, and also the founder of drawzania.com. The reason why the government support this drawzania.com is to be able, our citizens, to draw and freehand visualize ideas effectively. Not because of art, because the ability to communicate. As mentioned by him just now, one of the components of a good leader is communication. But nobody realized that communication is not just based on text, verbal, and non-verbal. The crucial part today, a good leader, is the ability for him or her to visualize their ideas effectively. Okay, then one more thing is not just about visualizing ideas, but to communicate ideas effectively to the highest level of thinking process, which is create. Okay, that is the challenge. Okay, next, the slide, please. Okay, to shortcut the process, this is the thing I would like to ask, and you have to fill in the box, not me, because you are the one who in that box. For example, a teacher. What can I do to improve my teaching and learning in a virtual environment? What can I do to make sure that my students are able to understand what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to deliver? The problem now is we are asking our children or our teachers to use gadgets that are very non-familiar for them. Like myself, when I did my training, I only used a low-tech solution, which is only 2 videos, 2 cameras, 2 webcams to deliver my message. One is the webcam that can show my face, another webcam that can become my whiteboard. When I speak, then the students can feel how I draw like I draw on whiteboard. Okay, that is the thing that we have to ask. Not creating something more complex. You have to think something more simplified to settle the ideas. Not to putting everything, digital, gadgets, everything. That one is more complicated. Because the objective of teaching and learning to make us understand. Once we understand, then we have to train the students to deliver that what they understand. And then, yeah, for jobs and so forth. So that is our challenge in teaching and learning. For me, it's not about gadgets. It's about the ability for teachers or students to understand the process. Like for parents. Okay, there's a lot of discussion about their children don't have gadgets, their children don't have lines. Okay, the parents should ask the question, what can I do to help my children that don't have that access? So maybe the parents have to use their mind to maybe to ask the neighbor, or maybe to ask the teachers to help him or her to settle that problems. Okay, not adding more problems or asking what the Kementerian have to do, can you do? What or the teacher can you do? As a parents, you have to ask, what can I do to improve that situation? If you refer to my diagrams, if everybody can ask, what can I do? I'm very sure we will meet somewhere in this and then settle all the problems that we have. So that is all about me, all about the things that I want to deliver. Maybe after this you may ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rizaimi. I think all the speakers have really gone in detail in explaining their area of expertise and some of the challenges they face. I would like to now open up to the floor because I want to give preference to the floor for them to raise any questions before I get the panel speakers to wind up. Open to the floor, please. You're getting any questions from the floor?
Hello, my name is Mohammed Nasser. I'm an international student at NT University. I have a question to our honorable guest from Teach Malaysia. Over the last decade, there has been a lot of discussions about the development of assessment criteria and to have an improved and enhanced evaluation criteria for the students. And this is a very noble objective. But can you share some insights, like how can we actually execute that? Because like there was like an incomplete initiative by the Ministry of Higher Education about the ICGPA to have like a GPA or evaluation criteria that can reflect the holistic development of the students. And how can you ensure that this new evaluation criteria can actually have like implement over the vast majority of the students from different socio-economic background?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I think Dr. Rafee is probably better placed to answer this question from a system level. I guess what I can speak to that is the Ministry of Education, from what I understand, Dr. Rafee, please correct me. From what I understand, is undergoing a process in which they are looking at key assessments and transforming that. One of the key things that the ministry has started to do back in 2012, I believe, is to shift towards classroom-based or school-based assessments. And I think that we need to, at the Malaysian sort of school level, it's really about this piece about empowering students and teachers to be leaders of the assessments that happen. And so I think key things that at the Malaysian level, and this is very contentious, is really what do? We test a lot in Malaysia. We have two sort of like national high stakes tests, which are the UPSR and SPM, and then we have PT3, which is in the middle of secondary school. But that's a more decentralized test now. But what the opportunities we have is actually to remove some of those testings. So we may maintain SPM at the end of high school but SPM still needs to shift to a more continuous-based assessment and a more holistic-based assessment. But I would advocate for, and I know that this is very contentious, like an elimination of the UPSR level test and have those tests be school-based instead, and empower the schools and the teachers to be able to do that. So the Ministry of Education actually has made a lot of progress towards some of these things. So for example, they have already eliminated examinations at the Standard 1 to Standard 3 level, and that's a huge, bold move from the ministry, considering the uproar that gets from the general public. But they can go further in removing the UPSR test in its current form. And the reason why I would advocate for those things is because having many points of national standardized testing encourages a culture in which the whole orientation of the system is fixated on the examinations, on these academic examinations. And then what you see in the classroom is that we then test at multiple points throughout the year, and a student's experience of school is basically just sitting for one exam after another. But if there are many, many, many more ways that we are aware of about assessment that can be project-based, that can be performance-based, that can be experience-based, that can be skills-based, that we can empower teachers and schools to be able to facilitate. And if we trust our teachers and trust our schools that they know best and they know their students' level and they know how to assess in a way that's going to truly indicate the students' performance, that's a direction I believe that we should head towards. But Dr. Rafee, do you want to jump in on that?
Yes, Dr. Rafee.
Thank you. May I? Thank you, Seng, for having that. Because the idea, I think, is to gradually change. If an abrupt change, then we will have a lot of resistance. So he mentioned about PT3, for example. It used to be a highly centralized exam by the national examinations, but we changed that into a mix. Like the standard is set by the central, by LP, Lembaga Peperiksaan, but the assessment itself is run by the teachers at the school level, and the marking is done by the teachers. The grading is done by the teachers. So it gradually changed. And the idea about having focus on exam, we can see across the board from the primary school all the way until secondary school and higher education. Perhaps in Malaysia, yes, we know we are too exam oriented, but to change that, it has been around for so long. So to change that in its time, determination, and of course support from everybody. For instance, this year, well, luckily last year, well, the blessing in disguise when we have this pandemic, so we cannot have UPSR. So people have been pushing for UPSR for quite some long. Why? Why do we need UPSR? For instance, many parents will answer, I want my children to go to residential school, fully boarding school. So they're aiming for that. But our students at that level, there are 400,000 of students sitting for UPSR. The only about 40%, only 40,000 that will go to this residential school, special schools, sports, arts, sekolah agama, and so on. So the majority would not go there. So when we focus on exam, we forgot that the main idea of having the primary school is to develop the basic skills for the children. And now having this, actually a blessing where the children, the teachers can focus on developing that basic skills for the children in the primary school. And only those who really wanted to go to those special schools will sit for that PKSK test, which is a combination. It's not an academic test per se. It's a combination of tools that we use for those who wanted to go to special schools. So I think that would add to what Seng mentioned earlier about being too focused on exam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I can go on.
Thank you, Dr. Rafee. I think we are already eating into lunch time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
So I think, yeah, just give 1 minute to each panel speaker to summarize. And there's a lot of challenges ahead of us with new technologies and new norms in each of your fields. Do you think Malaysia, compared to globally competing countries, are we ready to face the new technology changes, both in terms of the teachers who are delivering the teaching and the students and technology? Each minute, 1 minute each. Start with Dr. Rafee. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The answer is yes. I am fully confident that we are able to compete globally. Two simple examples. You walk to any of the schools now, you walk to any of the teachers now at home, they have their own digital studio. Teachers have their own digital studio with green screen, blue screen, and having able to use technology to teach. That is one positive sign. And two, we can see the effort taken by parents to make sure that the children will get the access to the internet, get access to the gadget and computers so that they can continue learning. That is a change of mindset to the citizen of Malaysia. And I believe with this, we can work together to ensure that what we envision for can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, your view?
Yeah, my view is definitely, as you can see, what moving forward as well. It's a very positive outcome that we've tested as well, what we've done and so on. And we also believe in democratizing education. So not only we have to divide between the urban kids, the rural kids and so on. I think for the urban kids, there will not be a big issue and so on. Some of them are kind of privileged. Let's talk about the underprivileged. That's why one of our MITstem.org, our goal is to democratize education, to even help the needed ones as well. We find that especially in our home country, we have other states as well. Some of them don't even have a device and so on. So in our platform that we built, it could actually also receive cache file. So they could actually go online. They can do it offline. They can actually study offline, can get information offline as well, because we have to have a dual system. One system which is you can able to go online, some systems you couldn't able online. But with the invention of 5G coming in, hopefully the rollout will roll out into other areas as well, especially into the rural areas and so on, because it's using different wave technologies that we can use. So that will actually democratize more of education, and we believe that every one of them, when given a device, they can do magic. They could even do a university degree as well. You could go, and they could get their wonderful job of the future that they're longing for. They could be even content people out there and so on. So we're very optimistic on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chan Soon Seng?
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's not so much a matter of can we, but we have to, right? It has to be our reality moving forward for us to be able to thrive in the future. And I think two key thoughts when we think about how we move forward is, number one, how do we really empower all of the actors across the education ecosystem? How do we ensure that teachers are able to feel like they are resourced and that they can innovate? How do we feel like students have leadership of their learning process and that it is not something that that's being done to them, that they're receiving, but they're an active leader of their learning? And then finally, I think what we then need to do is, as we empower people, how do we accelerate the sharing of knowledge and innovation across what's happening? I agree with Dr. Rafee. I love seeing Twitter photos of teachers and their studios and all the different things they're doing, but we know that that's a group of teachers. That's not every single teacher. But what we have is we see the potential. How do we accelerate that across the system, share best practice, and inspire others?
Okay, Dr. Zami, over to you.
Okay, my conclusion is very simple. For me, it's not about the technology is just an enabler. The most important thing is about to simplify the process of teaching and learning. That is the critical part. Because why? The end user, the end receiver, the receiver is the students. If you are able to simplify the process of teaching and learning, either virtual or non-virtual, that is the most crucial part. Why? Because when teaching and learning take place, we create a better generation that can create a better technology, not just a user of that technology. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking all the panel speakers in the usual way.